Alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, today we'll get started where we left off in the last class. And we talked about someone who's being led by other people in Salah. And so we talked about some of the things in regards to being led in Salah and also in leading in Salah, and what are the conditions for someone to be led in Salah. We also talked about the times that someone can shorten their salah and also combine the salah, and we talked about some of those scenarios. And then this class, we're going to talk about the conditions. We're going to talk about Jumu'ah in general, and we're going to talk about some other, inshallah, we'll talk about Jumu'ah specifically, and we'll go into some details. And then we'll talk about some of the other prayers that are in congregation as well, that also are prayed in a similar fashion to Jumu'ah. And so the author here, Abu Shujaa, rahimahullah, he starts off and he says, "Fasun wa shara'itu wujubil jumu'ati sab'atu ashya." So he first starts off with what are the conditions for Jumu'ah to be obligatory. So he says the obligation of the Jumu'ah prayer is met with 7 conditions. And so the first of these that he mentions, and the first few of these are mentioned just like in the prayers for general. So he says here, al-Islamu wal-bulugu wal-aql, and which is being a Muslim, reaching puberty at the age of accountability. We talked about this at the beginning of the time when we were talking about who is Salah obligatory on. So we talked about these, and also the sanity. Of course, anyone who's aware, then this is something that is for them, that they always have to pray. But there's a couple extra conditions as well that he brings here. As he says, وَالْحُرِّيَّةُ وَالذُّكُورِيَّةُ وَالصِّحَّةُ وَالِاسْتِطَانُ. And so he says here in the next few are freedom. So of course this is for like a free person. Of course, if a slave is busy with what his master is telling him to do and whatnot, this is something that would drop the obligation of Jumu'ah for him. And then the next one he says here is being a male, and this is for the men in particular. And the Jumu'ah is obligatory on the men, but it's not obligatory on the women. But it's something that it's sunnah for them to go. And of course, this is assuming that they're observing proper hijab and whatnot. And then he also, so this is for for being so all of the men are obliged to go to Jumu'ah. And then there's another couple ones here that he mentions. He says, "Was-sihhatu," and this is for that he's healthy or physically able. So of course, if someone is sick and he is, say he's got like serious issues where he can't stay in the masjid for a long period of time, or he can't get to the masjid, or it would be very hard for him, or in this case, this would drop the obligation of Jumu'ah from him, and then he could pray the Dhuhr prayer after that. And so this is for the people who are healthy or physically able. And then also there's another condition here, which is he says here al-istitan, and this basically means al-istitan means that someone is a resident, and this is the word istitan. When he uses it here, he means like a resident, meaning that he's not traveling, like the opposite of a traveler. And this word could also mean for people that are permanent resident, as opposed to someone who's not a permanent resident. And so also the permanent resident, this is one thing that we'll talk about in the coming up in the next couple conditions. But in general, the resident is someone here that it's obligatory on. This is the muqim, or like someone who is not a traveler. It's the opposite of the traveler. So as long as he is staying in a place for a while, then this is something that makes the Jumu'ah obligatory on him. And so also for the person who is leaving, going on a trip and whatnot, this is something that he needs to take into consideration, that Jumu'ah becomes obligatory from the time of the break of Fajr, or once Fajr has come in, then this person can't go and make a trip without unless it's like a absolute necessity, or he's gonna miss his say he's got a flight that he can't move it around, he's got to do that flight at that time, then this is one thing. Okay, he can miss Jumu'ah in this case and leave after Fajr. But if he leaves before, or if he leaves after Fajr, to go somewhere, and he knows that where he's going is going to miss Jumu'ah became obligatory on him while he at the time of Fajr. When that time comes, then Jumu'ah is obligatory on him, and he needs to make sure that he makes a Jumu'ah. So even if it's not in the same place, if he knows he can find a Jumu'ah where he's going, but this is something that's obligatory on him at the once Fajr comes in, it's impermissible for him to go on a journey and then leave the Jumu'ah obligation after that. So unless he's gonna miss, like if he's in a group or somewhere where it's gonna be very hard for him to find people that he's gonna miss out on, like whether it's his group, like a plane, or whether it's like a bus that's going on a journey and whatnot, then this is something that if there's gonna be a great hardship. If he doesn't get this one, then in this case he's excused. And so these in general are things for the people to make sure that they know that they make Jumu'ah and know who it's obligatory upon to make Jumu'ah. And also there's a great importance for someone making Jumu'ah, and the person, it's mentioned in the hadith that the person who misses 3 Jumu'ah, like three Jumu'ahs, then they will have a seal like placed on their heart. And of course this is a serious issue for someone who misses Jumu'ah. And also the other hadith that talk about the benefits of Jumu'ah are the person who goes to Jumu'ah, it will be an expiation for what was between those 2 Jumu'ahs. And so, and also we'll talk about some of the adab at the end of this, and like some of the etiquettes when it comes to coming to Jumu'ah and what we should do to prepare ourselves for that. And so, moving on here, he says, وَشَرَائِطُ فِعْلِهَا ثَلَاثَةٌ. And so he talks about the conditions for its action. There's 3 conditions for its action itself. And so he says the first one of these is أن تكون البلد مصرا أو قرية. And so then he says here to be in a city or town. And so like this needs to be a place where there's a bunch of buildings together, when people are living together in like kind of a village or something of that sort, where everything is put together as an actual inhabited space. Like this is the actual inhabited space where people have been here for a while. Not so if you have like a camp that people are out in the say you have Bedouins out there and they're camping out in the middle of nowhere, then this is not obligatory on them, even if there is a large amount of people. But it needs to be in a city or a town that's established. So this is the first of the conditions for the Jumu'ah itself. And this is like mentioned that the Jumu'ah wasn't made obligatory for the people that were outside, that were out, like there's lots of Sahaba that were outside of like Medina, and they were like Bedouins and whatnot, and this was not something that was obligatory for them, and they weren't called to come to, and it wasn't obligated for them to come to Jumu'ah and whatnot. But rather this was something that they that if they were able to come, then this is something that's for them, but it wasn't obligatory on them. And so this is the first of the conditions, to be in a city or a town. And then there's another condition here that he says here, and he says وَأَن يَكُونَ الْعَدَدُ 40 رَجُلًا. And so أربعين من أهل الجمعة. And so he says here that there needs to be 40 people from those obliged to pray Jumu'ah. He says Ahlul Jumu'ah, and this is from the people who are obliged to pray Jumu'ah. And he says 40 people. And this is the Shafi'i madhab when it comes to this issue, that there needs to be 40 of the mustawtinin. So like, and this needs to be 40 people who are residents in that place for the Jumu'ah to be valid itself. And this like number of 40, like where did they get this? And this number is mentioned that there was no Jumu'ah, like in multiple hadiths, that there was no Jumu'ah until there was 40 people. And there is general consensus, like there's ijma', that Jumu'ah, there needs to be some type of number. But when it comes to the Shafi'is, when they look at this, they look around, like what is the number that we can actually affirm that that is like the least amount of numbers, so that we're following what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he did. And so when they look at all of the different hadith, there's hadith out there that talk about things, but of the authentic hadith that's like clear that the Jumu'ah was established, it was established when there was 40, when there was 40, when there was more than 40 people. And that it was first prayed when there was 40. So they say that 40 is the number that we know for sure is there. And so it needs to be, so we need to make sure that 40 is that number. And even when looking at some of the hadiths, such as the hadith when that is mentioned in Surah Jumu'ah, when some of the Sahaba, and this was before the obligation of Jumu'ah was set for them, where they couldn't leave or anything, but some of the Sahaba, when they heard that there was one of the there was a trader that came in that was very like well known. He came in during the khutbah, and a lot of the Sahaba, they went to him, and of course this was before the obligation of Jumu'ah. So they left during the khutbah, and then and it's mentioned in some of the narrations that there was like 13 people left, or like some would say like 11. But so some said 13 is like the least amount. And the Shafi'is, they say it's possible that they left and they came back before it's finished. And it's possible, and the possibilities are something that the Shafi'is, if there's ever a possibility for this and that, they usually throw away the possibilities and they go with what is certain. And this is a general principle. So they basically say that it needs to be 40 people, and the people need to be actual residents of that place where they don't leave. By residents here, mustawtinin, is that these people don't leave the place that they're at unless they're not like someone who's here just for a certain time. So if they were like college students and whatnot that all came together for that, and they're all leaving that place that they're at for the summer, and they only come here just for the school year and then they leave, then this would not be counted for them as the people like Jumu'ah. But the way I translated it here was, I said people obliged to pray Jumu'ah, and this is probably a closer way. But the Shafi'is, they take kind of an extra care to make sure that they never go outside the way that the Prophet ﷺ prayed Jumu'ah. And so you'll find that the Shafi'i madhab is of the most strict when it comes to Jumu'ah and a lot of the conditions of it. And so also the next thing that he says here is وَأَن يَكُونَ الْوَقْتُ بَاقِيًا فَإِنْ خَرَجَ الْوَقْتُ أَوْ عُدِمَتِ الشُّرُوطُ سُلِّيَتْ ظُهْرًا. And so he says here the time needs to be left, like the time of dhuhr, it needs to be left, like there needs to be some time left in dhuhr for the Jumu'ah to be prayed in Jumu'ah, or in the dhuhr time. And of course the time for Jumu'ah is dhuhr, and this is something that is generally agreed upon. And this is the time that from the beginning of dhuhr to the end of dhuhr is the time where it's permissible to pray on Jumu'ah, and Jumu'ah should be prayed within that time, and it can't be prayed before that time, and it can't be prayed after that. And he says here, and if the time for dhuhr runs out or some of these conditions are not met, then it is prayed as dhuhr. And so this is if the Jumu'ah can't be met, or if say there's not enough people, or the people aren't in a town or a city, or there's not enough time to finish, or the time runs out before he finishes the Salah, then he would finish it as dhuhr. And so this is because dhuhr is like the standard. And then if we move to Jumu'ah, this takes the place of dhuhr, so it takes all the rulings of dhuhr when it comes to like the time that it needs to be prayed in. And there's another that's a great question. Like if this is for, and also the brother here, he asked, what if the students are, what if there's like a student that's staying for a full year, and then he's not gonna but he's gonna be there that whole year. There's a difference between it being obligatory on him and the difference between the Jumu'ah being valid because of him. And so like if there's 40 student, if all of these people were students in this case, and they know that they're not going to stay there and in this place, then it would need to have 40 people that are permanent residents in that place for the Jumu'ah to be valid. But the student is still obliged to pray Jumu'ah, because all of the people that are resident, they're obliged to pray Jumu'ah. But if somebody is if they're in a place where there's only like students and whatnot, this is where the problem comes with the Shafi'i madhab. And of course, there's many other madhabs, they don't see this problem. And this is something that's specific for like the Shafi'is, but it's still obligatory on the student to pray Jumu'ah if he's in a place where there's Jumu'ah and there are people that are permanent residents. We could say that if there are those 40 permanent residents, then this is what Jumu'ah is actually like considered as Jumu'ah with them. And so the permanent resident is different than a regular resident, which is just someone who's staying for a time and planning to leave. And I hope that's clear. Yeah. And so moving forward, so he says here. And so the next thing that he talks about the actual Jumu'ah itself, like how is this prayed? And so of course he breaks it down into fard, and he also breaks it into hayat, which are like the sunnah. And so he says here, وَفَرَائِدُهَا ثَلَاثَةٌ خُطْبَتَانِ, and so يَقُومُ فِيهِمَا وَيَجْلِسُ بَيْنَهُمَا. And so he says that there's 4 farida, which is things that are obligatory, and there's 3 things that are obligatory here. Afwan. And so he says here the first 2 are the 2 sermons and the 2 khutbahs, standing for them and sitting in between them. And so this is the first thing of the things that encompass the Jumu'ah as a whole, are these first 2 things. And Jumu'ah, in the khutbah itself, there's certain things that need to be done inside the khutbah, that are arkan, that are the pillars for the khutbah itself. And of these pillars, there needs to be someone saying Alhamdulillah at some point, or some version of this, Inna Alhamdulillah. And then there also needs to be a Salah ala Nabi. And so this is another thing that needs to be said, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin, and something like this. And so there needs to be a salah that's made upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also wasiyah bi taqwa, and that someone needs to call the people to fear Allah and to obey Allah, and to make sure that they're keeping up with what Allah has told them to do. And so this is something that is a vital part of the khutbah, and this is of the pillars that it needs to be said in there. And of course, these are things that normally we don't think about as a pillar, but it is something that is a pillar for the actual khutbah itself. And so then and so these need to be done in both of the khutbahs. And then there's a couple. One is that there needs to be an ayah that's recited from the Quran in one of the khutbahs at the very least. And also at the last khutbah, there needs to be a dua for the believers. So there needs to be some type of dua that's made for all of the believers. And these are the arkan of the khutbah. And of course, the actual khutbah itself, this is something that it shouldn't be necessarily super long, or it's something that's very hard on the people. And in general, it should be something that stirs the iman of the hearts of the believers when someone hears the khutbah. And this is one of the best things about Jumu'ah, is that it gives a chance for the general people to have their iman addressed, and given a place to have their iman increase when they're hearing things, and a reminder that is very important to fear Allah and to obey Allah, and also like in the khutbah, of course, to be relevant to the time and place of the people that are there. And so these are the basics for the khutbah, and there's 2 of these, and he says here, and he stands for them, and he sits in between them. So of course the standing is something that has to be done for the khutbahs, and then the sitting between them is to break them up into 2 khutbahs. And these 2 are these all must be done as a part of the khutbah, or the khutbatain. And so then he says here, وَأَن تُصَلَّى رَكَعَتَيْنِ فِي جَمَاعَةٍ. And so he says, and also that it's prayed as 2 rak'ahs. And then also the last one is that it's prayed in congregation. And of course, these things all need to be done. And so as we talked about before, the person who is being led in prayer, he needs to have the intention for his prayer, and to be like when he starts his prayer, he needs to have the intention that he's being led by somebody. And so here, this is also another important part, because here the intention to be led is something that's obligatory for the person that has Jumu'ah. So he needs to intend that he's praying in congregation when he first starts off his prayer. He can't like pray by himself, of course, because that's not going to be Jumu'ah. And so there's the next thing that he says here is وَهَيْئَتُهَا أَرْبَعُ خِصَالٍ. And so now he's going to talk about some of the things that are preferred when it comes to Jumu'ah. And these are things that are definitely very, very good things for everyone to take care of, and make sure that they do the best of their ability to try to take care of these things. And so he says here, al-ghusl wa tandhiful jasad. And so the first one here is al-ghusl. And we mentioned before that ghusl is something that is a sunnah for Jumu'ah, and I mentioned just some of the things of the reasons it's not obligatory. But this is also something that's very highly recommended, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا يغتسل رجل يوم الجمعة ويتطهر ما استطاع من طهر. And that the Prophet ﷺ says that there's not a man that makes a ghusl on the day of Jumu'ah, ويتطهر ما استطاع من طهر, and then he cleans himself as much as he can, ويدهن أو يدهن. So, and then also that he like, this is like a term for like oiling his hair, and this was something that was known back then. But this is like a way of making sure that his hair is nice. من دهنه أو يمس من طيب بيته, and also that he wears the best of his cologne or perfume. ثم يخرج فلا يفرق بين اثنين, and that this person he goes and he doesn't break two people apart. So this is, of course, observing the best manners when people are sitting in the masjid, not to like separate people, scoot over, but to have the most manners to where he's not disturbing other people. فلا يفرق بين اثنين ثم يصلي ما كتب له or ما كتب له. And so also then he prays whatever Allah has prescribed for him to pray. And so this is also another sunnah for someone when they come into the masjid on Jumu'ah, that they can pray any number of prayer that they want, like Salah. They can pray two, until the muadhin comes up and gives the adhan. So this is something that is a sunnah that oftentimes is left off, but this is a sunnah that is a very good sunnah for someone to pray that time while they're waiting for Jumu'ah. He also says, ثُمَّ يُنْصِتُ إِذَا تَكَلَّمَ الْإِمَامُ, and then he is quiet when the Imam speaks. إِلَّا, and so there's no person that does all of these things except غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ الْجُمَعَةِ الْأُخْرَى. And so, except that he is forgiven for what it happened from this Jumu'ah to the next Jumu'ah. And so this is a very important thing. Of course, someone who does this and follows this adab and this etiquette, this has a very huge reward for this. And there's also other rewards in regards to when somebody comes early. Then they will get a certain reward as if they have made a big sacrifice. So like the earlier that someone goes, then this would be like they will have a greater reward when they're waiting for the Jumu'ah prayer, and also walking to Jumu'ah and whatnot. And so he's going to mention some of these here. And so the first thing he mentioned was al-ghusl. And of course, the meaning of this ghusl is making sure that the person is not just getting water to their body, but rather this is also getting rid of any stenches. So like making sure that he uses the best of like soaps and whatnot, and also of cleaning anything to make sure that there's no stenches that are going to be bothering other people, and then he smells good while he's in the congregation. And also walubsu thiyab al-bid. And so he says here, and also wearing white clothes. And this is also another thing, as the Prophet ﷺ said, "Albisu min thiyabikum al-bayad." And so that the Prophet ﷺ says, wear from your clothes, like the white clothes, فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ خَيْرِ ثِيَابِكُمْ. And then he says, because this is of the best of your clothes. And so like wearing white on the day of Jumu'ah is something that is highly recommended, as this is the time to wear the best of clothes. And so then also he mentions here وَأَخْذُ الظُّفْرِ وَالطِّيبِ, and also making sure that someone cuts their nails for Jumu'ah, as well as wearing like putting on cologne or something that smells good. That's what tib is, and wearing cologne. So trimming the nails and wearing cologne, and also the trimming goes into like other body hairs as well, like the other body hairs that are a part of the fitra to trim, such as like armpit hairs, and also like the like pubic hairs and whatnot. These are all things that if someone trims this at this time, this is also good to make sure that they trim this. And of course, the trimming should never be left more than 40 days. Like this should always be done when it comes to these things. It should always be done within 40 days at the very least that somebody does. And so and also there's a couple other things that he mentions here that it's preferred to do, and he says here, and it's also preferred. It's also preferred to be quiet and listen when the imam is speaking. So he says here, وَيُسْتَحَبُّ الْإِنصَاتُ فِي وَقْتِ الْخُطْبَةِ, and he says it's mustahab, in that it's preferred for someone to be quiet while the imam is speaking. And this is something that some of the scholars have said this is something that's obligatory. And there's a couple of instances where the Prophet ﷺ, someone talked to him in Jumu'ah, and he didn't necessarily reprimand the person for talking to the imam. So, but in general, like for someone to be talking to other people, this is from very bad manners. And so he says here it's mustahab, but also this could be a reason for someone losing out on the benefit or the extra reward of Jumu'ah when it comes here. Is where he talked about that other hadith that he would be forgiven from what's between this Jumu'ah and the next. This was for the one who was silent at the time of the khutbah. So of course it's important for someone to be quiet during the time of the khutbah. And also he says here, وَمَنْ دَخَلَ وَالْإِمَامُ يَخْطُبُ صَلَّى رَكَعَتَيْنِ خَفِيفَتَيْنِ ثُمَّ يَجْلِسُ. And so for the person who comes in while the imam is giving the khutbah, then he prays 2 rakas that are very khafifatain, which are that are very like they're quick rakas. They're not something that is like a heavy rakas, but rather they're not prolonged in any way. They're very short and to the point, and before sitting. And the reason that they should be short is one, like the Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith, إِذَا جَاءَ أَحَدُكُمْ يَوْمَ الْجُمْعَةِ وَالْإِمَامُ يَخْطُبُ فَلْيَرْكَعْ رَكْعَتَيْنِ وَلْيَتَجَوَّزْ فِيهِمَا. So he says also here that tajawwaz fihima. And so he says if anyone comes in on the day of Jumu'ah and the imam is giving the khutbah, then he should make rak'atain, and then he should pray 2 rakas, and then he should make sure that he's very quick about it. Because of course someone who is prolonging their salah is a way of showing that they're not interested in listening to the khutbah, and the khutbah is the main point here. But we also have the salah here that's mentioned here. And so of course we would have the person pray first, and then he would make that. And if somebody comes in while the person's giving the adhan, then he would pray right away, like because the listening to the khutbah is something that's obligatory, or like it's something that's highly, and at least with the Shafi'is, it's something that's very, very highly recommended, and it's the purpose of the Jumu'ah. So this comes first before someone listening and replying to the adhan. So sometimes you'll have people that come in during the adhan, and then they just stand up and they wait for the adhan to finish while they repeat the adhan, and then they go and they pray. But rather, the person should actually, the person that comes in while the adhan's being made, then he is supposed to be listening to the khutbah. So he should pray during the adhan, and then so that he's not wasting any time where he could be listening to the khutbah. And of course, replying to the adhan is something that is sunnah. It's not obligatory. And listening to the khutbah, as many of the scholars from other madhabs, they'll say that this is something that's obligatory. And at the least, you could say is it's very, very highly emphasized. So of course, to put this first and foremost, this is something that's good, and this is something a lot of people they think that they need to reply to the adhan, so they wait, and then they start their salah once the imam starts giving the khutbah. And they should have prayed that during the time of the adhan, and there's no problem at the time of the adhan being given that the person goes and prays 2 rakats, and there's no problem with that at all. And so there's a couple other things about Jumu'ah that could be mentioned, and of them is reciting Surah Al-Kahf. And And so the Surah Kahf, there's a benefit for this because it's a light for the person from this Jumu'ah to the next. And so of course someone should read read every Jumu'ah Surah Kahf if they can, as there's a huge benefit and there's a blessing for that. And also having lots of salah, that someone says sends a lot of salah upon the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and that they and this can be done in many ways. Maybe it's studying the seerah on that day, maybe it's reading a lot of hadith, or maybe it's just repeating Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad, and repeating this dua or many other dua. But increasing that, and this is of the benefits. The benefits of this is that Allah will answer all the other prayers for this person, as well as it will increase the love for this person for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and it will also bring him closer in Jannah to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as the people who are the closest to him are the ones that had the most salah that they sent upon him, and that they prayed. And also, the brother here mentioned, does the Jumu'ah prayer count if someone intentionally misses the khutbah and only goes for the prayer? They don't get the reward that we're talking about here. Yes, they're technically their Jumu'ah, it goes away, but they're still a sinner for if they intentionally delayed it. The khutbah itself is something that they need to be there for, and so if they only go for the prayer, then they're sinning, but their prayer is valid. If that makes sense, because Allah says فَاسْعَوْا إِلَىٰ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ, and so that it's obligatory to go to Jumu'ah. Once the adhan is made for Jumu'ah, the people need to leave off at whatever they're doing and go there. And also alongside of that is the person who is, maybe he's in work or something, or he's buying and selling. This buying and selling is haram after the first adhan for Jumu'ah. As soon as the adhan happens for Jumu'ah, or the first adhan that is in the time of Jumu'ah, and so once the adhan for Jumu'ah goes out, then this is something that it's impermissible. It's haram to buy and sell at this time and make these transactions. And of course, this is unless there's a dire necessity, such as someone is on the way and they need to buy gas because their car is going to die. But in general, this is something that is haram for someone to do, to buy and sell and trade after that, because Allah says وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ, and to leave off bay', which is buying and selling. And so then also, if there's a time period between the beginning of the time of dhuhr and between the time when the person is going to give the adhan, then it's makruh for someone to do business, continue doing business at this time, because of course they should be making their way to the salah. And of course, this is very sad. A lot of times people will intend to only just go for the prayer itself, but they're actually, this is a sin. They need to be there from the beginning until the end. From the beginning of the khutbah to the end of it, and then to pray that. This is something that's all of this is the obligation. And yes, while their prayer, they pray 2 rakahs, so yes, their prayer counts, but they're still a sinner for delaying it, and they don't get the reward for that. And also, the people who do come into the masjid before the time of before the muezzin gives the adhan, then their names are written in the books of the malaika when this person comes in. And the Prophet ﷺ talked about in hadith that the malaika they write down everyone's name as they come in into Jumu'ah before the adhan. And once the adhan is given, then the malaika, they close their books once the imam gives salams and the adhan is given. And the malaika, they close their books and they're done recording the people that came in. So they miss out on this very important blessing here. Of course, this doesn't mean the people that come in, they're not still receiving a reward for listening and whatnot, or that their Jumu'ah doesn't count, but rather this means they're missing out on that great reward there. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so here we'll go into the next chapter, which talks about the Eid prayers, and this is kind of like the Jumu'ah prayers. Were there any questions before we move on? All right. And so the next thing here is that the author Abu Shujaa rahimahullah, he says, فصل وصلاة العيدين سنة مؤكدة And so he says here, the first thing he says for the chapter, the Eid prayers, he says the Eid Salah is a highly recommended prayer. And so this is the first thing that he says here, is that this the Salat Eid is something that's highly recommended. So what we would get from this is that it's not obligatory, but rather it's highly recommended. And some of the scholars, they would say that this is obligatory in a fardu kifaya. And so and this is for the individuals, it's not obligatory, but for like the community to come up with this, yes, this is obligatory for the community to pray this. But as far as the individuals, this is something that's sunnah, sunnatun mu'akkada, which is a very, very highly emphasized sunnah. And some scholars from other than the Shafi'i madhab, they talk about that it's obligatory. And so from that, we could see that you see that there's very high recommendation to do this. And so it's very highly emphasized for someone to pray the Salat Eid. And this is also, of course, this is of the Sha'a'ir Islam. Like this is of the things that Islam is known by, and that is of the biggest comings together, like for the community to come together. And at this time, this is of the most beautiful time. And of course, the Eid Salah is, of course, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. And this comes in, and he'll talk about some more of the details here. And he says here, he says, وَهِيَ رَكَعَتَانِ. And so he says that it's 2 rakas. And then he talks about each one of these rakas, there's something special about it. And he says, يُكَبِّرُ فِي الْأُولَى سَبْعًا سِوَى تَكْبِيرَةِ الْإِحْرَامِ وَفِي الثَّانِيَةِ خَمْسًا سِوَى تَكْبِيرَةِ الْقِيَامِ. And so when it comes to this here, he says that it's 2 rakas. And so this is like the Jumu'ah prayer. And that's 2 rakas, and also that it's prayed out loud. And also he says here, يُكَبِّرُ فِي الْأُولَى سَبْعًا سِوَى تَكْبِيرَةِ الْإِحْرَامِ. So after the Imam gives the takbiratul ihram, which is to come into to the salah, then he gives 7 from this, starting from here. Now he starts 1, and he says Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And so he repeats this 7 times, and then he starts off with the Fatiha and with the rest of the Salah as normal. And then for the second, he says, and for the second rak'ah, 5 takbirs. After the 1 takbir for standing. So he has the takbir for standing, he says Allahu Akbar as he's coming up from sujood. And then when he's here, then he says another 5 takbirs. So all in all, if you were to combine these, there would be 6. And the same thing, if you were to combine the first one, it would be 8. But we would say the first one is 1, it's separate, and then we add 7 takbirs after that. And so this would be that. And other people could raise their hands while doing these takbirs. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so this is what is narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, that he used to do this in this way. And so also and also the next thing that he talks about here is وَيَخْطُبُ بَعْدَهَا خُطْبَتَيْنِ وَيُكَبِّرُ فِي الْأُولَى تِسْعًا وَفِي الثَّانِيَةِ سَبْعًا. And he says that there is a khutbah after it, and there's a khutbah, and he says يُكَبِّرُ فِي الْأُولَى تِسْعًا. And so at the beginning of the khutbah, he makes 9 takbirs in the first one. So like when he starts off with saying Allahu Akbar 9 times. And then in the second one, 7 times. And this is something that's sunnah. It's not something that affects the validity of the khutbah, but this is something that's sunnah, that the Shafi'i madhab, they mention this. And so and also in general, the khutbah it's different here than from Jumu'ah, because it's not before the prayer, but rather it's after the prayer. And this is something that needs to be done after the prayer. And also it's also of good etiquette and manners for people to not leave during the khutbah and run away during the khutbah. Like from good manners is that they would listen to the khutbah, and also that the person, like the imam that is giving the khutbah, he takes in consideration like the things that the people need, and also that he is mindful of the people's time and whatnot and their state. And so this is for both salats, this is for both Eids in general, that this would be done in this manner. And we'll come back to this in general format in just a little bit when we come to the next couple salah. And so he says here, وَيُكَبِّرُ فِي مِنْ غُرُوبِ الشَّمْسِ مِنْ لَيْلَةِ الْعِيدِ. And so he says here, and in the evening before the day of Eid, we make takbirs starting from the sunset until the Imam starts the Eid prayer for Eid al-Fitr. And he says, so this is something that we do the takbir, which is it's the well-known Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. So we have this that we do, and there's variations of it. All the variations, there's no problem with variations. There's additions at the end, there's no problem with the additions. This is all something that was done at the time of the Sahaba and the Salaf, and they had no problems with the variations or the differences or the additions at the end. The important thing is that this is something that's done, and it can be done individually, and this is great for someone to do individually, and it's also done at the end of all of the Salah, as he'll mention here. And it can be done individually, as I mentioned, or it can be done in a group. There's no problem with this. This is something that is that a lot of, like Imam Nawawi talks about this. This is something like doing it together as a group. There's no problem with this, and this is something that was relatively agreed upon from the people of ilm. And so he says, ويكبر من غروب الشمس من ليلة العيد إلى أن يدخل الإمام في الصلاة. And so he says here that there's takbir from the night. Of course, all of the days in Islam, they start with Maghrib. This is the beginning of the day. And so it comes from Maghrib, and then this is the beginning of the day. The night comes first, and then the day comes after, and then it ends, and then Maghrib is a new day, or like as we would consider it. So this would start Laylatul Eid. So like the night before the day of Eid this is when we'd start the takbir, and this is for the Fitr, like this is for Salat al-Fitr, and for Eid al-Fitr. And then the next thing that he says here, وَفِي الْأَضْحَى, and so when it comes to Eid al-Adha, and then he says خلف الصلوات المفروضات من صبح يوم العرفة إلى عصر من آخر أيام التشريق. And so in the evening for the day of Eid, we make takbir starting from the sunset until the Imam starts the Eid prayer. Once he starts the Eid prayer, then the takbir that we were doing, it stops. This is for the Eid al-Fitr. And then for Eid al-Adha, after all of the obligatory prayers, from the dawn of Yawm al-Arafah. So we have like the dawn of Yawm al-Arafah to the end of Asr, the last day of Tashriq. And so this is the extra 3 days of Tashriq after like that first Yawm al-Eid. And so this is extra, and it's at the end of all of the prayers, all of the obligatory prayers, that it would be given the takbir. And some people have mentioned there have been a fatwa that like reciting the takbir together is something that's bid'ah, and this is something that it's ijtihad from them, the people who say this. But in general, there's a lot of evidence that the Sahaba, they used to make takbir in such a way that it would like shake the place, and like the way that many of the scholars understood this is that this would be done in a way that is coherent, not in a way that is kind of like separated and like this person's doing it by himself and this person's doing it by himself. Rather, it's something that was all done together. And also this is something that Imam Nawawi, he mentions that this is something that was established to a point where it's like close to ijma'. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so this is when it comes to the Eid prayers. So we have 2 rakas, and it's similar to the Jumu'ah prayer, except that we also have the 7 takbirs after the beginning takbir, and then we also have 5 takbirs at the end. And also there's sunnah for the people that for like the Imam to recite in the first rakah, to recite Surah Al-A'la, and the second rakah Surah Al-Ghashiyah. And there's also other sunnahs when it comes to this of some longer surahs as well. And so any questions before we move on to the next chapter? And also in general, all of the same things that we talked about, the cleaning and whatnot, and wearing the best clothes, this is even more emphasized for Eid as well, as it was for Jumu'ah. And so the next thing he's going to talk about is the eclipse prayers. And this is, we mentioned some of these prayers at the beginning, and so he's going to mention them here with some of the details of what is the difference between these prayers. But the eclipse prayers are general. The reason that they come is because the sun or the moon is going through an eclipse. And the eclipse is something that we see with our eyes. Like, it's something that we see with our eyes. If it's a cloudy day and there's an eclipse but we don't see the sun, even if we know, like if our calculations tell us that it's there's an eclipse, then it's not necessarily an eclipse for us until we actually see the eclipse and we see it. This is for the people who see the eclipse, for them to do that. And this is the same thing for if the eclipse is not on the horizon for where you're at. Same thing. Then this prayer is not there yet. It's only for the people that if that eclipse happens at the place where the people themselves see the eclipse. If they see it, then they go to pray. If they don't see it, then there's no prayer upon them. And this is for the solar and the lunar eclipse as well. And if there's a lunar eclipse in the daytime, then we don't take it into consideration. So say you have a lunar eclipse that's in the daytime, then this doesn't fall into it, because the daytime is for the sun, and so the lunar eclipse, if it happens during the daytime, then this is not an issue. Like, we don't take this into consideration. But rather, if there's a lunar eclipse at night, this is where it matters. And so here the author, he starts off and he says here, Faslun, وَصَلَاةُ الْكُسُوفِ سُنَّةٌ مُؤَكَّدَةٌ. And so he says that this is a very important sunnah. The eclipse prayer is a very important sunnah. And so there's different ways of saying the kusuf, and there's also khusuf with kha. And so some of them say that the one is for the lunar and one is for the solar, and it's also in Arabic it could be one for the other and the other for the one, and so it could be switched around. But in general, kusuf or khusuf, these are both referring to either the solar and the lunar eclipse. And so he says, in fatat lam tuqta. And so here he says, and if it's missed, it's not made up. And so this is something that if someone misses the prayer, then they don't make it up after its time, because its time is during the eclipse itself. And if you miss that time, then the point of the salah was to be praying during the eclipse. So there's no making up that salah, as opposed to other salawat. If it missed, you could make it up later. But so this one is a specific for that time. And he also says here, as far as the way that it's prayed, he says, وَيُسَلَّمْ لِكُسُوفِ الشَّمْسِ وَالْخُسُوفِ الْقَمَرِ رَكَعَتَيْنِ. And so he says that it's prayed for the sun, it's 2 rak'ahs. And he says for both of them it's 2 rak'ahs. And he says here, al-kusuf al-shams. And so he says kusuf is the word that is mentioned for the sun, the solar eclipse, and khusuf is the lunar eclipse, and this is for this would be rak'atain, so it's just 2 rak'ahs only. But also he says here something that's extra about this, with 2 ruku'. He says here, fi kulli rak'atin qiyamani, and qiyamani yutilu al-qira'ata fihima. And so wa ruku'ani yutilu tasbiha fihima duna as-sujud. And so he says here that it's 2 rak'ahs with 2 times of standing in each rak'ah. So you have a rak'ah, and there's 2 times of standing within this rak'ah. So the first time so the person first here, he says here that it's 2 times of standing in each rak'ah with a long recitation in each one, with 2 ruku' in each rak'ah, with lots of tasbih in each of them, as opposed to the sujood. So when someone comes into this salah, they would come in and they would give as we have a normal salah, would come in takbir to ihram, of course with the intention of the eclipse prayer. And then when he prays, he would have a very long standing. He would recite with a long recitation, and then this is of course to encompass the time of the eclipse. And then he would go into the ruku', and then he would come back up, and then he would recite again. Then he would go into ruku', he would come back up, and then go into sujood. So there's 2 ruku' here that are done within a single rak'ah. And this is the difference with this prayer as opposed to the other prayers. And it's mentioned as Bukhari and Muslim, they mentioned from Aisha radiallahu anha in a hadith, and that she said the sun there was a solar eclipse at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he prayed He prayed with the people at that time. And so he stood up and he prolonged the standing very long. ثم ركع, and then he made ruku', and it was a very long ruku'. And then he came back up and standing, and also was very long in standing. And then he recited again, and that was a little less than the first one. That was a little less than the first standing that he did for the recitation. ثم ركع فأطال الركوع. And then he made ruku' again, and he made this a little less than the first ruku' that he was. So everything was a little less as it went farther. And then he made a sujood, and also was very long sujood. And then he did this in every single rak'ah. So like the next one, he did the same thing, where it's very long and with two ruku'as. And also the Prophet ﷺ, he said after this, "Inna ash-shamsa wal qamara ayatani min ayatillah." That he says that verily the sun and the moon are ayat, that they're a sign of the signs of Allah. And وَلَا يَنْخَسِفَانِ لِمَوْتِ أَحَدٍ وَلَا لِحَيَاتِهِ, and that they don't go into, like, they don't have a solar eclipse because of the death of any individual or the life of them, like such as if someone important was born, say. And he says, فَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ ذَلِكَ فَدَعُوا اللَّهَ وَكَبِّرُوا وَصَلُّوا وَتَصَدَّقُوا. And so if you've seen this, like if you've seen the eclipse he's referring to, then pray to Allah, and also kabbiruhu, which means like to make takbir. And وَكَبِّرُوا وَصَلُّوا وَتَصَدَّقُوا, and to pray and also to make sadaqah, and so they give out in charity. And this is something to do. And also this time that this happened is mentioned in the seerah that the Prophet ﷺ, his son Ibrahim, he passed away, radiallahu anhu, and he was a young boy at this time. And when he passed away, then at the same time, roughly, then the solar eclipse happened. And so this was something that a lot of the people were talking about. Oh, maybe the solar eclipse happened because of the death of the son of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was very clear that the sun and the moon, they don't do this because of the death of anybody. And so he separated that, like that cause and effect thing that can happen, that superstition that could possibly come into people's mind when they see one thing happen and something else happen alongside of it. That he cut this from them, and he pointed them. He said, "This is something that are from the ayat of Allah. These are the signs of Allah, and this isn't because of this happened or this person or that person was born or died." And they used to have this kind of thought, and this is something that you'll still find with like like you have astrologists that think that things happen because of other things, and then of course this is a kufri belief. And so the Prophet ﷺ was very, very clear to keep people very far away from that association of this happened and this is something that Allah prescribed, and this happened and this is something that Allah prescribed, and this doesn't happen because of that. And so this is something that is mentioned. There's this particular hadith is mentioned in so many different ways and versions, and it's very very, very well known. And also in this particular instance, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that he was shown the Jannah, and he was also shown the hellfire while he was in his Salah. And so this was of a time that it was a very intense Salah for him, and that he was shown the hellfire, and he was shown a ton of things were revealed to him while he was in the Salah of the eclipse Salah. And of course, that is something that's special for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are things that he mentions here about the way that it's done, and basically this is taking from the hadith that come there. And so he also says here, وَيَخْطُبُ بَعْدَهَا khutbatayn. And so then after the khusuf, there would be a khutbatayn, just like we'd have for like Eid. There'd be two khutbas after the salah. This is the same thing here, that there'd be two khutbas after the salah, with sitting down in between them. And this is taking it as it is like that. And also the Prophet ﷺ, he addressed the congregation in a general way after that's mentioned in the hadith. And also he says here, وَيُسِرُّ فِي كُسُوفِ الشَّمْسِ وَيَجْهَرُ فِي خُسُوفِ الْقَمَرِ. And so here he says that during the sun prayer, then it would be something that's prayed silently. for the long period, and for the khusuf, which is the lunar eclipse. So for the solar eclipse, since it's in the daytime, it's prayed silently, and the lunar eclipse, since it's in the nighttime, it's prayed out loud. And the fact that the lunar eclipse is prayed out loud is something that is agreed upon. As far as the solar eclipse, this is the area of there's a bit of a difference of opinion. But the Shafi'i madhab is that this is to be prayed silently, and there's some hadiths that strengthen this view here. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so alongside of this salah, there's also another salah that is like this salah, and this is the salah of for asking for rain. And we have just a few more minutes here, and we'll probably finish up with this salah, and then we'll talk about Salat al-Khawf in the next class, inshallah. So here, the author, he says, Fasl, وَصَلَاةُ الْإِسْتِسْقَاءِ وَصَلَاةُ الْإِسْتِسْقَاءِ مَسْنُونَةٌ فَيَأْمُرُهُمُ الْإِمَامُ بِالتَّوْبَةِ وَالصَّدَقَةِ وَالْخُرُوجِ مِنَ الْمَظَالِمِ. And so here he says that this is the Salat al-Istisqa, which is the prayer for rain, like istisqa, like saqi, and in Arabic means like watering. And so like istisqa is like the asking for that water. And so this is something he says here is sunnah. This is a salat that is sunnah for someone to do. And also he says وَيَأْمُرُ الْإِمَامُ بِالتَّوْبَةِ. So the imam or the leader, he would call people to make tawbah. Of course, if there's a time where there's no rain, this is a sign, or this is a possibility that there is something that people have done and they're being punished because of sins. And so the first thing that the imam would do he would call people to come back to Allah with tawbah and to repent and make sure that if they're holding on to any sins, that they repent from this. And then he says was-sadaqah, and also that he commands them to give sadaqah, as this is a way to like to get rid of the sins, as water puts out fire. And also wal-khuruj min al-mazalim, and also to stop oppression, like to get rid of any oppression that someone is doing. If someone is doing oppression to somebody, that they stop that, and they make sure that they step out from that. And also he says وَمُصَالِحَةُ الْأَعْدَاءِ, and so also, and to make things right with their enemies. And this is the enemies within like the person, if they have a problem with their other Muslim brother, then this is something that they need to make things right with them. As far as like the disbelievers and whatnot, then this is something that remains as enemies. There's no problem with that. And so he says here, وَصِيَامُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ, and also for someone to make siyam, like to fast beforehand, for 3 days beforehand. And this is in general because fasting is a way for someone's prayer to get answered with seeking. This is like a form of tawassul, which is seeking closeness to Allah with good deeds. And this is a form that is prescribed of tawassul, of seeking closeness to Allah with someone's good deeds, and so that Allah will answer their prayers. And this is something that the leader is encouraged to command the people to do these things, so that Allah will relieve them from this hardship. And also then he says ثُمَّ يَخْرُجُ, and also then after that, the imam goes out with them on the 4th day. ثُمَّ يَخْرُجُ بِهِمْ فِي الْيَوْمِ الرَّابِعِ فِي ثِيَابِ الْبِذْلَةِ. And so then he goes out with them on the 4th day in a humble work clothing, like thiyab al-bidla, which is like a work clothing, something that is very humble in appearance. It's something that like a normal, like someone like who's working outside or like that's doing hard work, he wears something that's kind of like that lowly clothing. And he also says here, وَاسْتِكَانَةٍ وَتَضَرُّعٍ, and also like in a lowly appearance, which is like very humble. And then he says tadarru', which is a type of seeking Allah's help. And this is a very important for someone to have this type when they want to see Allah's help. Then they humble themselves and they want to Allah to relieve the hardship that is upon them. They come with humility to Allah. And this is mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked to give to make this prayer, that he went out in this way, a very very humble and with humility, and was seeking Allah's help in this submission. And then then also he says here, وَيُصَلِّي بِهِمْ رَكَعَتَيْنِ كَصَلَاةِ عِيدَيْنِ. He prays here 2 rak'ahs of prayer like it would be prayed for Eid prayer. And so this is similar to the Eid prayer, but the difference, as we talked about in the Eid prayer, there is the extra takbirat, and this is something that and here it would also the Shafi'i madhab is that he would do these things as well. So he would pray with the takbirat afterwards, as well as he would pray with the 5 takbirat as well. And Allah knows best with the takbirat, but this is the Shafi'i madhab where they talk about this. I haven't come across something that is like a clear reference to the Prophet ﷺ doing this, but they basically say this is like that, so it takes the same ruling. This is doing qiyas. And so so this salah is like the Eid prayer, and then he also makes the khutbah afterwards. So he says ثُمَّ يَخْطُبُ بَعْدَهُمَا, and so then he would make the khutbah after the Eid prayer, or after the istisqa, the prayer of istisqa. And then he changes, the next thing he says, وَيُحَوِّلُ رِدَاءَهُ وَيُكْثِرُ مِنَ الدُّعَاءِ. So he says, وَيُحَوِّلُ رِدَاءَهُ, and rida is the type of clothes, it's the thing that someone wears on top. So if somebody has if you were on this is like the cloak that someone would wear normally on top of their, on the top half of their body. And so he says, وَيُحَوِّلُهُ, which means like to switch it from one way to another. And so like if someone was wearing, let me see here if I can, I've got a cloth here. So if someone was to have say here, they have this is like the ridat. So if they were wearing it like this, then they would switch it and they would turn it the other way. They would switch it. And also they would turn it upside down as well. So to flip it around, and this is mentioned of the Prophet ﷺ. He switched his ridat, or the ridat before, which is turning it inside out. It's like kind of flipping it inside out and also turning it upside down. As it's kind of symbolic for Allah changing the situation that they're in. And so this is what the Prophet ﷺ was narrated as doing. That when he asked for that, then he changed this, and he changed it which is turning it from one side to another, and then also turning it upside down, and switching it from it completely from one way to the other. And so here he also says وَيُكْثِرُ مِنَ الدُّعَاءِ وَالْإِسْتِغْفَارِ, and then he also the person should continue make lots of dua and also seek forgiveness. And then also وَيَدْعُ بِدُعَاءِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, and then also he should pray with the dua that is reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I'll read the dua, and here there's a lot of balagha that's in this dua, and this dua is kind of put together, it's pieced together from many dua that are narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And some of the narrations are strong and some of them are kind of weaker, but when it comes to dua and whatnot, this is something in general, all of the meaning is good. And even if the chain of narration isn't authentic all the way 100%, and there's some weakness in it, this is something that it's not a huge deal with this, because a lot of it is authentic and some of it is it's possible, and it's not something that affirms a new ruling. And so basically the dua is Allahumma ja'alha suqya rahmatin, and so he's asking Allah to make it a watering of rahmah, which is of mercy. وَلَا تَجْعَلْهَا سُقْيَا عَذَابٍ, and don't make it a pouring out of adhab, which is punishment. وَلَا مَحْقَ وَلَا بَلَاء, and also that it's not something that takes away goodness or is a great trial. وَلَا هَدْمٍ وَلَا غَرَقٍ, and also not of something that's destructive, or gharaq, which is if water were to come into flood and destroy things. Allahumma, and then the rest of it is Allahumma ala dhirabi wal akam, and then on the hills, he's asking for it to be upon the hills and of the smaller hills and whatnot that are there. ومنابت الشجر وبطون الأودية, and also on the for the bases of the trees, like the places where trees are, and also upon the valleys, and also in the the bellies of the valleys. اللهم حوالينا ولا علينا, and also to put it on the sides of us and not on us directly. As of course, if all of the rain came right on top of the town, maybe it could be a cause of hardship, but rather on the places of where you will find the benefit of this rain, such as in the places of growth and tilling. And so also Allahumma skina ghaythan mughitha, and also asking Allah to give them that water that is a ghayth, which is a form of the rain, mughitha, and mughitha is a salvation, someone who gives salvation, a rain that is that gives salvation, of course by the power of Allah. هنيئا مريئا مريئا سحا عاما غدقا طبقا مجللا دائما إلى يوم الدين. And so he basically says for this rain to be a very good rain that is giving lots of growth and whatnot, and that is steady until the day of judgment. Which means that the rain is something that's helpful, and it doesn't stop from the seasons and whatnot and give them another famine. And then the next part is Allahumma skina al-ghayth wa la taj'alna min al-qanitin. And he also says to give us this ghayth, this rain, and not to make us of the qanitin. And a qanit with a ta is someone who is of of the people that are very qunuto. With that is someone who is despairing, or someone that is in a state of despair. And so and then he says here, Allahumma inna bi'ibadi wal biladi min al juhdi wal ju'i wal danki ma la nashku illa ilayk. And that verily in this with the people and with the lands, there is a hardship, and there's a famine and whatnot, and that we don't go to anyone else with our complaints except to you. We go to you alone. Allahumma ambit lana azhar wa adir lana ad-dara. And then also he asked that Allah would make the farming land grow, the till, and also that the milking beasts would have lots of milk. واكشف عنا من البلاء وأنزل علينا من البركات السماء وأنبت لنا من بركات الأرض. And also we ask that Allah would give them barakah from the sky and also from the earth. وَاكْشِفْ عَنَّا مِنَ الْبَلَاءِ مَا لَا يَكْشِفُهُ غَيْرُكَ. And also relieve us from this trial and tribulation, that which no one can relieve except for you. And this is using tawheed to as a way of tawassul. And also he says here, Allahumma inna nastaghfiruka wa innaka kunta ghaffara fa'arsili as-samaa'a 'alayna midrara. And so also he says that we ask your forgiveness, and you are the one who loves to forgive and that has great forgiveness. So send upon us send from the sama, or from the sky, much rain. And this is also taken from from Quran, where Allah says, فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا, where Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, he told his people to ask Allah, فَاسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ, to go to seek forgiveness of your Lord. إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا, that He is very forgiving. يُرْسِلِ السَّمَاء, if you do this, then Allah will send from the sama the rain in a very, very a prolific way for you, and that's in a very blessing way, and in a way that's very blessing. And so this is kind of taken from that, and this hadith is taken from a lot of different hadith, and so he kind of put it together and made a big dua. And a lot of the scholars, they took this dua and found that is a beautiful dua, and so they use it. And so وَيَغْتَسِلُ, then he goes back into like the rulings. And so we just finished here. And so he says, then as far as the last rulings here, he says, وَيَغْتَسِلُ فِي الْوَادِ إِذَا سَالَ وَيُسَبِّحُ لِلرَّعْدِ وَالْبَرْقِ. And so then he says here that he would wash in like the water that comes from the rain. So he washes in the rainwater if he can. And this would be like if the rainwater came down in like say it came down in a valley or something, or in a little river or something, maybe he washes in the rainwater, because this is something the Prophet ﷺ, he used to do. And he would say that this was something that was قريب العهد من ربه, and that he would say that this was something that is hadith al-aqd. That, of course, like this is coming from the sama, and this is it's coming from the sky. And this is something that, of course, is closer to Allah, and it's also closer to the barakah that Allah is sending. And this is of the barakah that Allah sends. So putting this upon him is something that he would do to seek barakah. And also the وَيُسَبِّحُ لِلرَّعْدِ وَالْبَرْقِ is when somebody sees the ra'at, which is like the lightning, or when they hear the thunder and when they see the lightning, the barq is the lightning, then they would say Subhanallah. And there's a dua for this as well. And in general, the dua is something I believe some of the scholars, they would talk about the like whether or not the hadith is sahih or not. But in a lot of these things, there's it's not affirming something that is new. Like, of course, tasbih in general is good, and it's rather, it's just kind of like, is it with some of these things, can we use like hadiths that are not very like that and that have problems in them? Can we use them to act upon? And this is something that a big majority of the scholars say, yes, you can use them if the action that you're doing is already firmly established in the deen. And also, if the hadith that you use, you don't believe if it's like that it's not a very, very weak hadith, and that you also don't believe that the Prophet ﷺ said it. And so there's certain conditions for using weak hadiths, but one, it needs to be firmly established without this hadith. Like, we need to have this thing is firmly established without it. And then if this hadith comes and it's something that's supporting, or it's something that is like an incentive to someone who's doing something, it helps incentivize them to do this. And this is something that it kind of the scholars of hadith, they're more relaxed when it comes to accepting these things. As long as it's not affirming something new in the religion or goes against something that is already established in the religion, of course. And as long as the person that recites it or like that talks about the hadith, he doesn't say that this is something that is something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually said, but they're clear about that it is either weak and whatnot. And so, of course, like sometimes there's weak hadiths that people will use that establish something, and this is a problem. Like, it's establishing something new, no. But if it's something that is already established and it's just kind of like helping someone do more in that way, this is something. As long as the hadith is not like is not something that's like extremely daif. Like, sometimes there would be people who are liars that would make up a hadith, and we know that they're making up hadiths. So in this case, we don't take their hadith as any case. Like, we don't do anything about this hadith. It's completely it's completely thrown aside. Of course, we act upon the general commands of the Sharia, and in accordance with that. But of course, we don't take like things in this sort. And this is, of course, like a certain issue that comes up with a lot of more details. But in general, when it comes to hadith that are referring to either the seerah or referring to sometimes even in tafsir, or sometimes when it comes to things that are like that are heart moving, these the scholars of hadith, they're more lenient with it. And they're not as hard when it comes to the halal or haram. When it comes to halal or haram, this is where they're very, very strict about making sure that the hadith is complete and completely verified and whatnot, and before they take it or even consider it. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.